I lost myself trying to impress friends who encouraged cheating, and I ended up destroying the man who truly loved me with all his heart. I never thought that one day I'd be writing something like this, but I need to get it out of my head. I don't know if I'm doing it to vent, ask for advice, or simply try to understand at what moment something so valuable turned into a stupid decision that ended up ruining the best stage of my life. The only thing I know is that I destroyed it, and not even for something real, but for an absurd need for validation that I confused with freedom. My name is Felicia. I'm 26 years old, and until recently I was in a relationship with Feed, who's 27. We were together almost 3 years. I've never been one to tell personal details, but I think it's important to explain that our relationship worked well. Really well. He was attentive, kind, supported me in my projects, remembered important dates without me asking him, accompanied me to see my family, although sometimes he felt lazy and always made me feel safe. He wasn't perfect. Sure, we had differences, small arguments over daily things, and sometimes our ways of communicating clashed. But there weren't lies, there wasn't screaming, there wasn't mistrust. It was a stable, healthy, functional relationship, one of those that don't seem extraordinary until you lose them. My friends said he was too calm. One of them even stated jokingly that a man that good only serves to get bored. And although I laughed at that moment, something of that comment stayed trapped in my mind like a thorn. My friends are a separate issue. I've known them since college, all close to my age. They were always emotionally intense, unpredictable, and with a view of life based on quick experiences, social validation, especially the idea that personal freedom is doing what one wants without caring about effective consequences. I'm not saying I'm better or worse, just different. And for a long time, I tried to balance my way of being with theirs because I liked belonging to the group. But over the years their behavior changed. I don't know if it was a pattern that was always there and I hadn't noticed it, or if it was something that evolved with time, but they started talking about their relationships as if they were competitions. Each one told experiences, not to share them, but to demonstrate that she had more power, more attention, more control, what they called empowerment. For me, that word had always meant emotional independence, personal security, conscious decisions. For them, it seemed to mean something else: manipulation, cheating, conquering people just for entertainment, breaking bonds before allowing someone to hurt them. And the worst is that they bragged about it. Whenever we went out for coffee or dinner, the conversation ended in stories about how they cheated on their partners, with whom, how many times, and how easy it had been to hide it. They narrated it as if it were a fun adventure, a triumphant anecdote. They didn't perceive harm, or guilt, or doubt, only pride. I listened in silence. I didn't usually intervene. I just observed how they all celebrated among themselves. But I started noticing they looked at me differently, as if I were the out-of-tune one. On more than one occasion, they told me phrases like, "You're too good, surely you haven't even lived. If you're so faithful, it's because you don't have options. You can't stay with your first boyfriend. Seriously, you need experience." They said those words laughing, but there was a clear background. I didn't fit into the group's dynamic. At first it didn't affect me. I always thought that each person lives love in their own way. If they needed to feel free like that, it was their decision. I didn't have to follow that example, but the pressure doesn't always arrive like a direct hit. Sometimes it's slow, almost imperceptible, like a constant drop that wears down the stone until breaking it. I started feeling I was living a life that was too simple, that my relationship wasn't exciting compared to the stories I heard, that I had nothing to tell, that I was invisible inside the group. It wasn't something I thought consciously, but I surprised myself imagining situations that never before would have passed through my mind. Superficial fantasies, not emotional, just hypothetical scenarios. I didn't desire someone else, but I wanted to feel desired. I wasn't looking for love, just attention. I didn't need another person. I needed to prove that I could also attract them. That thought makes me uncomfortable now that I write it with honesty. It wasn't desire, it was ego. The straw that broke the camel's back was a conversation at one of their houses. We were drinking wine, chatting, and one said something like, "If you haven't been cheated on nor have cheated, you haven't learned anything." They all nodded as if it were a universal axiom. I replied that fidelity didn't seem boring to me, but a conscious choice. They laughed. A friend looked straight at me and said, "You say that because you've never had real options. If you had someone insisting, you would have already fallen. You don't have temptations because you don't attract attention." That comment hurt me more than it should have. Not because I believed it, but because it made me doubt myself. I felt shame. I felt that they were judging me, not for my values, but for my capacity to be desired. And although it shouldn't have mattered, it mattered too much. A part of me wanted to show them they were wrong. Not show it with words, but with facts. Not because I wanted to cheat on feed, but because in my confused mind I wanted to feel validated, I wanted to fit in. That night on the way home, I thought a lot about what had happened. Feed wrote me a nice message, asking if I had arrived well and telling me he hoped to see me the next day. I replied with coldness, not because I was annoyed with him, but because I was annoyed with myself and wanted to feel something different. I needed attention, not love. There the problem started. It wasn't a sudden fall, it was a process. I started uploading more photos, answering messages I ignored before, paying attention to looks I didn't register before. I didn't do it to find someone, I did it to have something to tell, to generate interest, to build a story I could brag about. A week later, someone wrote to me. It was an acquaintance from college, not someone close, but a guy who at the time had shown interest in me. He greeted me, commented a photo, and I replied with more enthusiasm than I would have shown at any other moment of my life. He didn't attract me, he didn't interest me, but he made me feel important. Conversations became frequent. I didn't flirt openly, but I insinuated things. He interpreted those signals as real interest, and I didn't do anything to correct him. It reached a point where he asked to see each other. My first reaction was to say no. My conscience told me there were no reasons to accept. But the insecure voice inside me, the one that wanted to be part of the group, said the opposite. I thought about my friends, I thought about the conversations, I thought about what they'd say if they knew that someone was looking for me, and I rejected him. I thought about how I could tell the story if I accepted. I wanted to have something to brag about, something that said, I can too. So I accepted. Not for desire, for ego, for validation, for fear of not fitting in, for wanting to feel interesting, for a reason so empty that now I'm ashamed to admit it. And that was the first step toward losing the love of my life. We met in a cafeteria near a shopping plaza. It was a busy place with small tables and soft ambient music. When he arrived, I didn't feel anything special. I greeted him with a smile, trying to act with confidence, although inside I had a mix of uneasiness and guilt. From the start, he was direct. There was no deep conversation nor intention to know each other beyond the superficial. He spoke as if he had already assumed I was there, because I wanted something physical, as if my presence were an implicit confirmation. Each question was insinuating, and each comment sought to take the conversation to a sexual tone. I replied with evasions, trying to keep a subtle distance, but I didn't get up, nor did I stop him with firmness. I didn't know how to handle the situation without looking like someone who had backed down after having accepted the date. At one moment, without prior warning, he tried to touch my leg under the table. I pulled back immediately. He laughed as if it were part of a game and insisted again with words I don't want to repeat. I got up, breathed deep, and said I had to go. There was no scandal or screaming, just discomfort. He tried to make me feel guilty for heating him up and then doing nothing, but I didn't answer. I simply left. When I arrived home, I felt confused. Nothing important had happened, but I didn't feel proud either. I felt used, although I myself had put a part of the context. I wasn't a victim, but I didn't like the role I had adopted either. However, when I talked with my friends, I distorted the story. I told them simply that I had gone out with someone and that nothing happened, but it was okay. They looked at each other with an expression of skepticism, as if they didn't believe me entirely. One of them said, I don't think it was a big deal, but if so, well good, you have to start somewhere. There was no emotional support or worry or real questions. Rather, it sounded as if I had taken a step toward becoming one of them. I felt recognized, accepted, part of the group. That feeling became addictive. After that, I started going out with 2 ex-classmates from college on different occasions. There were no kisses or physical encounters, but there were insinuations, hidden messages, meeting without mentioning I had a partner. I never felt connected with any of them. It was like participating in a game I didn't understand but wanted to win. Feed didn't suspect anything. He continued treating me with affection. He asked me how my day had been. He brought me flowers occasionally and reserved special dates to be with me. And every time he was good, I felt more weight on my conscience. Instead of stopping, I sank deeper until Eric appeared. I met him through one of the guys with whom I had gone out before. He wasn't someone with whom I had trust, but from the first moment I felt something different. He was attractive, athletic, sure of himself. He had a way of speaking that captured attention. He seemed interested in me in a direct way, without beatings around the bush. That mix made me feel something I didn't experience with the others. Superficial desire, intense, immediate. He asked me to see each other, and I accepted without analyzing it too much. I didn't think about consequences, I didn't think about Feed, I only thought about what this would represent for my ego, and how it would be heard when I told it, and how it would make me feel validated. We met one afternoon at a mall. We walked, talked, and the conversation flowed with an ease I didn't expect. He made me feel attractive and admired. When he told me he wanted to continue speaking in a more private place, I thought about it briefly, but not much. I just wanted to continue feeling that attention. We ended up in my apartment. It wasn't something planned, it wasn't romantic, it wasn't meaningful, it was impulsive and empty. After that, I felt two things at the same time, guilty and desired. It was a contradiction I didn't know how to handle. When I told it to my friends, I didn't do it with shame. I narrated it as if it were an achievement, as if I had marked one more point on an imaginary scoreboard that only existed in my head. They reacted as if something finally had happened. At last, it was time for you to live something real. You see, you weren't made for a single person. The words that now seem hurtful to me at that moment seemed like recognition. I started seeing him more frequently, not as a couple, but as an escape. It was a bond based solely on the physical, on feeling validated. I reached the point of ignoring messages from Feed to answer Eric first. I convinced myself I could handle it, that it was just something momentary, and that it didn't have to affect my real relationship. Until Eric stopped answering me. From one day to another, his messages became short, indifferent, distant. I wanted to see him. I needed to feel that it hadn't been just a disposable experience, so I insisted more than I should have. When he finally answered me, he did it with a sentence that left me paralyzed. Don't be intense. It was just a fling of a few days. I have a wife. I felt an immediate void in my stomach. I didn't know if I was more affected by discovering I had cheated on someone without knowing it, or because I myself had been treated as something disposable. I felt discarded, insignificant. That feeling consumed me for days. I couldn't concentrate. I felt guilty, but also hurt. And that combination unbalanced everything. Feed noticed it. He asked me if I was okay. He tried to encourage me. He didn't know that the person he was trying to console was the same one who had betrayed him. The day arrived when everything collapsed. We were having dinner together in a quiet restaurant. We had ordered pasta and wine. It was a night he had planned to reconnect. According to what he said, I was distracted, lost in my own mental storm. We were conversing about his work, and without thinking, I called him Eric. The silence was immediate. Feed left the silverware on the table. He looked at me fixedly, not getting angry at first, just confused. Who is Eric? I tried to correct myself, pretend it was an error when speaking, but my voice trembled. He didn't insist with screams or reproaches. He just looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, mistrust. Why did you call me that? He asked calmly, but his tone had an evident tension. You don't have friends called that. You've never mentioned him. I repeated that it was a mistake, but the lie didn't have support anymore. His look sought a truth behind my words. He took his phone and said, "Show me your cell phone." I felt a knot in my chest. I tried to refuse, invent excuses, but he didn't back down, he didn't scream, he didn't implore, he only said, "If you're not hiding anything, you don't have a reason to deny it." That phrase collapsed the last barrier. Trembling, I put the phone on the table. He took it and reviewed recent conversations. The expression on his face changed slowly. First surprise, then disbelief, then pain. Finally rage. He read messages with dates, places, photos, insinuations. He didn't need context. There was no way to justify it. How long? He asked with a broken voice. I didn't know how to answer. He hit the table with force, making several people turn to see us. He got up from the chair, breathing agitatedly. I loved you. I took care of you. I was there for you in everything. And you. You did this. I tried to approach crying, but he backed away. Don't touch me, he said with contained tears. Don't touch me again. I stayed standing in front of him without words. He clenched his teeth as if he needed to contain himself to not scream. And you still have the face to cry, he exclaimed. This wasn't a mistake. They were encounters, messages, dates. This is deliberate betrayal. I wanted to explain that it wasn't for lack of love, that I let myself be carried by insecurity, that he hadn't done anything wrong, but nothing I said sounded real out loud. I don't want to hear you, he interrupted. I don't want anything with you anymore. He took his jacket, left money on the table to pay the bill, and gave a last look, one I won't ever forget. It was the look of someone who had lost the person he trusted. He left without turning. I stayed there alone, surrounded by people who didn't understand anything, holding a phone that still showed messages that had destroyed my relationship. And that was the night I lost the love of my life. After that night at the restaurant, I returned home with a sensation of emptiness I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't just guilt, it was a mix of anguish, fear, confusion, and loss. During hours I was sitting in the living room reviewing every decision that took me to that point, as if by understanding them I could reverse them, but there was no way. The next day I needed to vent and feel support. I decided to tell my friends what happened. I thought that by having been an indirect part of my process, they would listen to me, help me understand, and maybe offer me comfort. That thought was naive. We met in a cafe. I arrived with swollen eyes. They were already there laughing, as if nothing in the world worried them. I sat down and breathed deeply before speaking. Feed broke up with me, I said. Finally, he found out everything. There was a brief silence, but it wasn't of shock nor empathy. It was as if they were just processing the information to turn it into sarcastic comments. One of them smiled with mockery. How did he discover you? Did you tell him? I nodded slowly. I didn't want to explain details, but they demanded them. When I told that I had confused myself and had said Eric's name at dinner, they burst into laughter as if I had told a comic anecdote. How stupid you are. How do you say the name? Not even a lie you know how to handle. We have never been discovered. What kind of beginner does that? Really, what an idiot. For that you wanted to play like us. Each phrase was a direct blow. There was no trace of support, not even a constructive criticism. I tried to keep myself firm, but my hands trembled. Finally, one of them, the one who always led the group, concluded, "It's not our fault you're so naive. If you were going to cheat, do it well." Those words broke me more than any insult, because at that moment I understood something that should have been evident from the start. They were never friends. They didn't rejoice for me, nor did they support me, nor did they care about my well-being. They only sought mutual validation through toxic and destructive behaviors. I had tried to fit into a place I should have never considered. I got up from the table without saying anything else. They continued laughing while I moved away. I cried on the way home. During the following days, I was submerged in guilt, sadness, and regret. I didn't eat well, I didn't sleep, I didn't talk to anyone else. I asked myself if I should try to recover Feed or if I should accept the consequence. Finally, I gathered courage and wrote to him. He didn't answer. I tried to call him. He didn't answer. I wanted to go see him in person. I didn't want to appear without notice, but I felt that if I didn't try, I would regret it all my life. I walked to his apartment one rainy afternoon. When I knocked on the door, he took time to open. When he did, his expression was tense, tired, as if I were a memory from which he tried to detach. I just want to talk, I said with a broken voice. I have nothing to talk about with you, he answered. I tried to stop the door before he closed it. I managed to enter partially to the conversation, but he didn't want to look at me. Just listen to me, please. I didn't want to lose you. I let myself be influenced. They pressured me. They told me that if I was faithful, it was because no one else wanted me. I just wanted to feel sufficient. I was wrong, but I love you. I love you, really. He held the edge of the door with force, as if he wanted to close it with more intensity than he could express with words. And what does that change? He asked with coldness. I don't care about the reason. What matters is that you did it. You lied to me, you betrayed me, you humiliated me. You weren't sincere when you could have been. I tried to get close, but he took a step back. I don't seek excuses, I said between tears. I just want to fix it. I can go to therapy. I can cut contact with them. I'll do whatever is necessary. I just don't want to lose you. For an instant I thought that maybe he would soften, but his look was harder than before. You already lost him. And not because you don't try, but because I don't want to live this again. I don't want to spend my life with someone who chose to destroy a healthy relationship for ego. You don't exist for me anymore. Go. Don't look for me anymore. I stayed immobile, hoping that those words weren't definitive, but they were. He closed the door without saying anything else. That was the real ending. There was no reconciliation. There was no later conversation. There were no messages seeking closure, only silence. Months passed, I don't know exactly how many. Time began to feel like something that simply passed without purpose. During that period, I tried to focus on rebuilding my life without him. I stopped talking with my old friends. I moved away completely from that environment. I tried to work on myself, but I still carried the pain and guilt. Eventually, I found out that Feed had met someone else. I didn't ask how nor when, but I knew it through social networks. She was very different from me physically, and also had a personality more calm and serene. She looked more emotionally mature. When I saw them together for the first time in a post, I felt jealous and sadness at the same time. I continued without getting over him. The lowest point arrived one night when I saw a photo of her holding a bouquet of flowers with a dedication written by him. I recognized his handwriting. It was a type of detail that before he had with me. That image hit my pride and my insecurity. Without thinking, I wrote to her by private message. It was a desperate, irrational impulse. I told her that Feed still looked for me, that we still talked, and that he missed me. It was a lie, but in my mind I tried to convince myself that I still had a place in his life. She didn't answer by writing. She called me. I answered with a trembling voice. At first, she didn't speak. Then, with a firm, secure voice, she said, "So you're the person who cheated on him just because your friends also did it." I already heard that story. I don't know what you hope achieving this, but stop trying to get into his life. I wanted to explain to her, but she didn't let me. She continued speaking with a cutting, almost implacable tone. I don't know what you pretend. He doesn't want to know anything about you. You don't have a space here. I respect him. You didn't. If you're jealous, solve it alone, but stop looking for him. And a piece of advice, stop holding on to something you destroyed yourself. No one took anything from you. You lost it. Her last phrase was the one that hurt me the most. Look for your own life and stop comparing yourself. And by the way, take care and lose weight. It wouldn't be bad for you. Goodbye. And she hung up. I stayed with the phone in my hand, feeling a deep pain, not for the physical insult, but because deep down I knew she was right. I was the responsible one for everything. There were no excuses, there were no alternative versions. The social influence didn't matter, nor my insecurity, nor my emotional voids. I made the choices, I crossed the limits, I destroyed a healthy relationship for external validation. I lost a man who loved me not for lack of love, but for an identity crisis that I chose to solve in the worst way possible. Today I don't seek that anyone sees me as a victim. What I did was wrong. I wouldn't repeat it ever. I learned that loyalty isn't measured in options, but in conscious decisions. And I understand that no external validation compensates the loss of a real relationship. I don't know if I'll love again in the same way, but if someday I have another opportunity, I won't make the same mistakes. I don't want to live looking for approval. I want to learn to love myself without destroying others. This time I really learned.